We've got Jerome Villar saying, wondering, do you think Star Wars benefits or suffers from not having a clear Kevin Feige-style figure leading the entire franchise? It's a good question, Jerome. I think it's a little bit twofold. One is that Star Wars, the projects around Star Wars have not been in a consistent singular story like the MCU, where, yeah, you could have a prequel film or you have a film that might take place, come out, 1 month, and then 3 months later you have a film that comes out and it actually takes place before the film that came out before it. You can have that type of stuff along the timeline with the MCU, but it's mostly linear. It mostly continuously moves, and that allows somebody with that kind of architect style like a Kevin Feige to plan and strategize his pieces and oversee all the movies at once, because most of them are all leading to the same direction. With Star Wars, if you're going to do Andor in the Dark Times, and then you're going to do Simon Kinberg that's coming out at post Rise of Skywalker, and then you're going to do Mandalorian and Grogu, which is New Republic, and then you decide to do Old Republic, which is 1,000 years before that. It's hard to have one person in charge of all of it. But what I think they do need are singular people in charge of different eras and different time periods. It doesn't mean you can't have your own original projects like an Andor, like have a Tony Gilroy, basically a creator-driven show that he's in charge of. But if you're going to have the New Republic era and make this whole Mandalorian universe, might as well take Jon Favreau or Dave Filoni out of the consistent on-set writing process and make them the architect of the whole thing. Have other people start directing these movies. That can be run like the MCU. If you go and do the Old Republic and you decide to have 2 or 3 shows going on at the same time and a couple movies, that needs an architect. So I think they need multiple people. It's not just one person overall, because Star Wars spans so many different time periods, so many different styles, so many different genres, that you really do need different people in charge of each facet. Whereas the MCU has basically become its own genre of superhero film. It's a subgenre of superhero film. It has similar comedy, it has similar style, similar shot selection, similar look. Everything is very similar because Kevin Feige's overseeing everything.
Yeah, I think the key word of architect is probably the most important part because Jerome, when you're saying like, why don't we have like a unified head? Why don't we have someone in charge? I mean, we did. It was George Lucas, right? Like for the longest time, that was how it worked out. Yes, he didn't really care much in the later part of the 80s and most of the 90s of what people were writing. Kind of just said like, oh, change that character's name. We're like, oh, that's a cool idea. Oh, just change this and that, right? Like that's kinda how he treated a lot of his extended material. Definitely the stories that he was involved in, he was there. He was shaping it very actively, and with one unified head, we've seen that it doesn't always work, and like Liam said, we need an architect, but we need architects for eras. Like, we need not showrunners, we almost need, like, era runners, right? So, the New Republic stuff, yeah, I mean, why not have Favreau and Filoni take a step back and be that, and then let other voices come in. If anything, that would rejuvenate it even more. Probably let like a lot of smaller projects kind of work out there, and then you can flesh it out, and then you can connect everything. There's always been huge talks about like, no, Star Wars needs to really push for like that HBO level past just what we saw in Andor with like an Old Republic series, which would be fantastic because there's so much story and lore there. But a huge critique of that era is that none of it really syncs up or lines up. You just kind of hand wave stuff from Tales of the Jedi to stuff that's going on with, Knights of the Old Republic, and then suddenly you've got Star Wars: The Old Republic, and then there's huge gaps with the new Sith Wars and all that, and it's stretched over 4,000 years, and you're like, "Does that even make sense?" Having someone who's in charge of that, sees all that stuff, sees that's what inspired everything in Legends, now we're like, "Okay, how do we organize it? How do we simplify it? What do we add from canon that's already there that'd be cool connections?" Star Wars is a behemoth. It just doesn't necessarily have live action every single year, but animation's so important, books are so important. Having someone who's gonna, kinda pluck from each, connect each, no, that seems a little too much, but like Liam was saying, architect for eras, that way, like, like, if there are people more in charge of a specific medium, like books or stuff, at least you're like, "Okay, I'm only gonna ask you questions during this 100-year period. How would this help shape this TV show we're making or movie and stuff like that. Now, how would they interact with each other? Who's in charge of them? That's a whole other question. I think that kinda comes down to more of, like, does it make sense practically as a business to have paying all these different people for different periods that might not have the same amount of money going their direction and all that? And I think that's what's making it such a hard thing right now for Disney with not just Star Wars, but Marvel. Like, Feige has a lot of benefit of the doubt, but he still has to make sure that Daredevil after it got reworked too, with new showrunners, then into Thunderbolts, which is gonna lose money. Fantastic Four, which has never been truly a critical darling, hasn't made too much money before in its other live action adaptations, leading into Doomsday, like, he did it once, sure, but when things were simpler, when it was just movies, when it was all linear, and Phase 3, besides Captain Marvel, was just lined up stack as after stack after stack, right? So, it was a much simpler equation. It's a huge issue when you've got something that's got this many layers of entertainment and mediums in a way that the MCU never really had. So, I'd love to say that we could have 5 Kevin Feiges, but that's just it's such an impractical thing, and it's already a miracle that the MCU, after this many years, still has a Kevin Feige that's, fairly successful, all things considered.
It is impractical, but it's something that if you were tackling a specific time period, you hire based on what you're working on, right? And maybe the real answer is don't bite off more than you can chew. If the New Republic is your era right now, focus on the New Republic, make Favreau in charge of the New Republic era, make Filoni, because he's CCO, the person who reports to the CEO president, which is right now Kathleen Kennedy, will be somebody different in the next year or two. Have that bridge because he knows the New Republic era well, but he also knows all the eras of Star Wars pretty well. And they have that working relationship. I think that would work pretty well. And I mean, that's kind of how they've been operating in general, right? We just haven't seen it put into action yet. And it's also interesting to see how Dave Filoni works on Ahsoka while also being CCO, because I know Dave Filoni loves doing creative pursuits, but it really probably is in the best interest of Star Wars and of him to step back and now be more of an active producer on things rather than writing everything and directing everything. I wouldn't want to lose him writing for Star Wars because I do enjoy all his ideas, but if he's going to be truly a CCO, he's got to oversee everything Star Wars is doing. So that's another question, unless they decide we're just working on New Republic only and that's where our focus is. And then we're going to have somebody else as the architect, whether it's Simon Kinberg or whoever, as the architect of the post Rise of Skywalker part of the Star Wars timeline. The other thing they could use really is a division between film and TV. And Marvel used to have this, and Marvel made better TV shows when they had this, even though Ike Perlmutter and that side of Marvel was a weird setup because they were almost two completely different companies, because Marvel TV was still more affiliated with the Marvel company than Marvel Studios was at the time, where it was almost its own little thing. And so there was a lot of clashing and division there. But instead of hiring out of that mold, and leaving room for division, what you could do is say, okay, we've worked with this person and we think they are good enough to be in charge of Star Wars TV. Now we got this person in charge of Star Wars film. And then you have president who's in charge of everything. And that's what pretty much every movie studio has. And it's kind of weird Lucasfilm has never had that, because Walt Disney Studios as a company has always had a TV side, a film side, an animation side. It's not all one group of people. And so even though Star Wars is all one property, they produce so much content that it makes more sense to have multiple people in charge of multiple different things. And then, one person who's in charge of everything, not maybe overseeing actively everything, but making sure everything's on the right track. And so they need a Kevin Feige in that sense, but they don't need a Kevin Feige in the sense that they need somebody dictating story to everyone. They can still have story grow organically from different ideas. You need people creating a cohesive vision for the studio itself. And I think that's one of the big things that they definitely need moving forward. I think they're kind of shifting that way with the way Favreau is now moving back into film, with the way Filoni has kind of been the one focused on TV now, which is where he was, born out of. I think it's good to have that division of labor because it helps people actually get to focus on the thing they want to and not just be spread thin throughout everything. So that's another way they can definitely tackle it. Hello there, Star Wars lads fans. Thank you so much for watching this video. This was actually a clip from one of our live streams and Q&As. So if you'd like to join us every single Tuesday around 7:30 p.m. Pacific time, make sure you join us. It'll allow you to ask a question that might be turned into a video. Hopefully you join us. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure you like the video, subscribe to the channel, and comment below all of your thoughts on this clip. Thanks for watching, and we will see you all next time.